Hey folks, this is Jacob Rhodes, and what I'd like to show you here today is the Router Gantry System. And we've got a lot of really good, interesting features that I'd love to get into, but what I want to start with is basically just showing you what it does. Alright folks, so that's how it works in action, and now that you've kind of seen what you can get out of the system, I'd like to have a chance to reset everything here and then basically kind of go into more of an engineering design discussion and really show you why you'll be able to get the same quality of cuts time after time on your projects using our system versus one that you may have built yourself or the other ones that are on the market. So give me a second, let me remove the cameras and set some stuff up, and we'll go from there. Alright folks, so what I've got laid out here are two short pieces of our extrusion or dovetail connectors, an example of our long runners or the long linear slides, and then also our short runners, which are the ones up here that your router plate and everything bolts down to. Effectively, all of this is manufactured in-house. We bring the extrusions in finished, and this is a 100% custom extrusion, alright? So we did all the design work on this, and we really wanted to make the extrusion robust to where you wouldn't have any noticeable deflection whenever you're going back and forth across the system. But we also wanted to make sure that it was modular from the beginning and give you the ability to both expand the width and the length of your basically gantry system depending on your projects that you want to do with it. So how we did that basically is that we have two female dovetail grooves on each side of our extrusion here, and then we have our dovetail connectors. Right, these are the same connectors that we use in our track saw system, which has been on the market since 2009, and we've got a fair number of companies that are above 30 foot on the total length for their track saw system. So why worry about reinventing the wheel? We know it works. So what this does is you have basically two dovetails, one on each side of your extrusion. And what that does, whenever you tighten up the set screws, is that it's completely self-aligning, right? So the set screws are going to force the wedges to go together. It's going to be repeatable, and it's a very simple system because simple is usually the best thing to do. It's also a very old technology. It's the same idea as a dovetail gib, which is very, very common in your metalworking lathes and milling machinery, okay? So effectively what you can do with those is if you have a longer project, you can add an extension kit to it. If you only have the one project, once you're finished with it, you can take the extension kit off and you can go back to a smaller unit. The unit that we have here is a 4 foot by 4 foot capacity unit. That means that you can put a 4 by 4 piece inside the gantry and actually access the entire face. The outside dimensions of this gantry system are 57 by 57, okay? So that covers the rails. You know, again, it's 100% custom extrusion. It's actually made in Cincinnati, Ohio. And then we manufacture pretty much every other component in here except the threaded rod, which is made in Independence, Ohio, just south of Cleveland. Okay? As far as the linear slides, these are machined entirely out of Delrin. If you're familiar with what Delrin is, that should be all I've got to say. But basically, it is an engineered plastic that was designed for the aerospace industry to replace aluminum. It's got pretty much all the strength of aluminum. It machines very beautifully. It holds wonderful tolerances. And it has a very low coefficient of sliding friction. Say that 5 times fast. But basically, whenever you put it on the rails, it doesn't take a whole lot of force to move it down the rails. The only lubrication that we suggest is a little bit of Johnson's paste wax. It gives you a dry film lubrication. It doesn't really gum up with sawdust. You want to apply that to the runners or the slides, as well as the rails. Okay? Now, the same thing goes for our short runners, which is what we put onto our router plate for basically making the router adapter plate that you bolt your router to. We took it a step further though because we added in leveling vials. Now these are a great quick reference whenever you set the gantry system up to tell whether or not your router is sitting on a level plane. And it's not the fact that it's level, it's just the fact that we're saying it's on a consistent plane within the entire envelope of the gantry system. If one of them is off, simply check with a 4-foot bubble level and make sure that everything's the way it's supposed to be. Okay? Now, effectively having all of this CNC machined gives you a level of accuracy that it far exceeds what you normally need for woodworking. For instance, we hold these to plus or minus 2 thousandths. Okay? That's about 2/3 of a sheet of copy paper. With the gantry system and the 48-inch capacity span that we have here, the rails were designed so that if you took a single rail supported at each end and put a 45-pound weight in the dead center, you would have less than 5 thousandths of an inch total deflection on one rail. We're using 2. Generally speaking, your router ends up being 15 or 20 pounds. So what that accounts for is as you're using the system, if you get the one that does not have the threaded rod and you start to stretch out, how many of you have made a DIY system that you start to get a belly in the middle of your workpiece whenever you start to stretch out because nobody has 4-foot long arms? Okay? That's one of the key reasons we put the threaded rod in there. Additionally, it keeps you from having to do the rowboat exercise. By having that threaded rod in there, you can pin your router and you can index back and forth. It gives you the ability to make all your passes with the grain of the lumber, which ends up creating a lot less finish sanding. Okay? We are using a very inexpensive bit. It's between 30 and 40 bucks. It is not one of the carbide insert bits. Unless you're doing 10, 15, 20 slabs pretty consistently, generally speaking, the solid carbide is the way to go. Okay? So that's a quick overview of basically how the entire system is made. Again, we've got 100% custom aluminum extrusion made for us in Cincinnati, Ohio. It gets a satin finish, hard anodized. And then on top of that, we've got the dovetail connectors for making everything self-aligning when you expand it on the width or the length. We've got solid Delrin for all the sliding components. And every bolted joint has brass inserts, so you don't have to worry about the threads basically degrading over time. If that happens, we replace a brass insert. It's very simple. Okay? One of the things I forgot to mention is actually how everything basically goes together to create the bridge. On each end of the rails we have end caps. Those are also CNC machined out of Delrin. Those are going to bolt basically to the brass inserts. But if you see, there's also this little pyramid structure. Try to figure out a good way to get it to the camera here. Okay, so that little pyramid structure is also going to match up to the bottom of the extrusions. And what that does is that helps eliminate side-to-side racking. One of the things that I will point out is that if you do grab the very end of the extrusion or the bridge assembly and you move it, there will be racking. One of the things that you want to do is basically just try to reach in about 12, 18 inches and do all of your movements from there. This is a very wide span. Okay, so that is one of the things just to basically keep in mind. Now, above and beyond that, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. I think we've done a pretty good job here in the overview, showing you what the system does, the quality that you should expect time after time, and basically give you the Cliff Notes version of some of the engineering that went into it. Okay? With that, folks, have a wonderful day and let us know if you've got any questions. Thank you.